Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for participating. Now we are live. People are starting to connect. Thank you very much for registering to this webinar on COVID-19 challenges for in-house lawyers in Mena region, organized in cooperation, in partnership with Bonelli Erede. So thank you very much to Bonelli Erede. My name is Aldo Scaringella. I'm the founder of LC Publishing Group. And I'm here just to say thank you to every one of you to be registered on 22nd July to this webinar, to be interested to this. We have people registered from different parts of the world. So to some of them, I can say good afternoon. To some other, I can say good morning. But we are very happy because we organize this webinar with all our websites, also Iberian Lawyer, the Latin American Lawyer, as well as in-house community, Legalcommunity.ch, in-house community US. So thank you very much. Thank you to Riccardo from Bonelli Erede. Thank you to our friends Mugi and Mahmoud. Thank you very much, and all the other speakers. I would announce that Mr. Azem El Touki from ABB will be not with us for a last minute problem. So will be not connected. We apologize with everyone. We apologize with all of you. But at this moment, I would leave the word to Ilaria Quinta. Before to leave, I will say that all the video will be tomorrow available on our YouTube LC Publishing channel. So every one of you can see all the webinar. Now I will leave to Ilaria Quinta, who is our journalist, senior editor from LC Publishing International magazine and websites, and in-house community.it. So thank you very much and enjoy this webinar. Thank you, Riccardo. Thank you, my friends.
Thank you very much to you too, Aldo. Today we will be discussing about coronavirus since this pandemic has lots of legal implications and is challenging the legal world. We will try to talk about its impacts, to discuss on how companies are building a new normal, and we will try to share our speakers' personal experiences to give you an idea on how the legal community is dealing with this crisis. Let me thank our online audience for taking part to this webinar, to whom I remind that it is possible to send to us questions, clicking on the Q&A icon, indicating in case you have a preference, the name of the panelist you'd like to reply. Because at the end of the panel, we will try to reply to some of these questions. Let me now introduce our speakers. We have Riccardo Bicciato, partner Bonelli Erede. Altogether, we have Mohamed Elmogy, General Counsel, Middle East and Northeast Africa, Siemens, with Mahmoud Sharawi, Group Legal Director, Elsewedi Electric Egypt. We then have Radwa Elsaman, Legal Consultant, Sofreco, and Professor of Law at Cairo University of Law. And then we have Riham Naim, Country Head of Legal Novartis. Welcome and thank you for joining us. Let's start this discussion from the impact that the crisis is having on the general counsel profession. Radwa, how the outbreak of the pandemic changed your job, your daily activities as a general counsel in the very first day of the pandemic? Were you ready for crisis management? Have you been involved in new activities? Which are the major challenges you faced so far?
Well, first of all, please allow me to thank LC Publishing Group and all the sponsors for making this webinar happen. Thanks for Aldo for the introduction and Ilaria for the for moderating the session. And of course, thanks for all our guest speakers and my colleagues, and for the audience for taking time to be with us today in this webinar. So about the question related to challenges and what did we manage to do to meet all these challenges? Actually, we had so many challenges. I will try to be precise as much as I can. The most important and the biggest challenge was related to business continuity and the financial issues. I mean, the budget in general. Everybody needed confidence, management, clients, partners, suppliers, everybody. So what we did is, first of all, we had to set priorities. What comes first and what comes next? Is it operation, financial issues, safety? And of course, we had to keep consulting with all the management and relevant key persons to decide our priorities. We had also to be very responsive and to stay updated. And by staying updated, I mean having up-to-date and detailed knowledge of all the changes taking place in government policy, and communicating on daily basis with the regulator, and sometimes more than one time a day. The other difficulty was related to employees' issues. The claims resulting from the reduced salaries in certain cases, changing the working strategies and working hours in other cases. So we had to maintain a solid and transparent communication with all our employees. And we had also to find some alternatives to working strategies, such as working remotely from home, for example. Another difficulty was related to safety at workplace. It was a high requirement. The company provides a safe place for work and take all the measures related to health and safety. So we had to be very careful to avoid exposing company to a liability, and of course to guarantee and secure a safe working environment for all the employees. And the primary step was to conduct risk assessment and then to take all the precautionary measures, such as remote work or reducing travel requirements and sometimes preventing travel at all, rotation, work shift, and so on. Another difficulty I can say was related to concluding AGMs. Unfortunately, the corona has arisen during the season of annual general meetings. And with all the travel bans and the bans for gathering, we had to find some other alternative ways for gathering, such as the online meetings, like what we are doing right now. But we had to be very careful and to consult the constitutional documents of the company, the existing local laws and regulations and practices, to avoid any conflict with any legal requirements. And of course, we had to be also careful about communicating with shareholders to keep them aware of any changes happening. Another major challenge was related to data privacy. The problem in Egypt in particular is we didn't have a data protection law. I mean, specific data protection law. We just had, at the early stages of the pandemic, I mean, we just had it very recently, maybe I think 1 or 2 weeks ago. So we had to consult the general rules and regulations and see what kind of data we can reveal, and are we even allowed to reveal some data, and what are the best ways of collecting data? Is it questionnaires, running tests sometimes? And what we really did in reality was helping the HR department to prepare a policy regarding the data security. One last challenge serious challenge we have been facing was related to the pending litigation and all the current disputes. So courts ceased working for some time, and we had to find some alternative ways to litigation, and the only way was to meet with our counterparties and sit down for negotiations and trying to reach settlement. We couldn't do this with the majority of disputes, but at least we managed to do this with some disputes. It was also challenging to understand how technology works in jurisdictions that allow the remote justice for our claims in foreign jurisdictions. The last thing I would like to illustrate here was related to having a plan to review all our insurance policies. Actually, insurance policies would help a lot with financial difficulties and losses. So we had to review our insurance policies and to see what are the policy triggers, what were the events covered, is it liability, business interruption, or whatever. And we had to pay high attention to all the required procedures, such as notifications or submission of claims. So these are more or less the major challenges we have been facing. If I continue talking about the challenges and how did we manage to deal with them, this would take me hours. So I just try to be concise as much as I can, and I will leave the floor to the next speaker. Thank you.
Thank you very much also for this comprehensive overview of the major challenges that many general counsel had to face over these months. In general, the pandemic is also impacting on the business of law. Mr. Bicciato, you work at a law firm, so you're dealing with various clients at the moment. What are the major legal implications of this pandemic that you are experiencing connected to different fields, and in which particular field you are receiving a growth of demand from clients?
Well, COVID-19 had an inevitable impact on all business, and as a consequence also have an important impact across all our practice areas. However, some practice areas, which has a strategic value for the client, has seen an increase of workflow. I'm referring to regulatory, labor department, construction department in terms of how to manage contract management, litigation, or let's say for pre-litigation analysis phase, while we have seen a reduction which has been, however, compensated by the increase of the other departments on other sectors like M&A departments, white-collar crimes, tax. So there has been an increase on certain practice areas and a decrease on others. And this was the first impact. The second, COVID, due to the domino effect on the whole business of the client, has forced us to look at the needs of the client from different angles. So we were actually, as a firms, we implement and we create a specific task force, which we call a COVID-19 task force, with the aim of approaching under an holistic view all the needs of the client. So this was done immediately as soon as a bunch of rule and laws has been promoted to tackle the COVID situation, and which you know, and we have reviewed them under a number of aspects to be sure that all the needs of the clients have been really addressed. And this has been done on the lockdown phase, but also with the aims of how to support the companies to reopen, because that was a different analysis again. Here in Egypt, personally, I'm working, one of my focus is construction sectors. We have seen, as the previous speakers, a huge increase of requests and advising on matters such as labor, health and safety at the site. You have to imagine that on sites where you have 4,000 people working on the site, the COVID has triggered a number of issues, from an increase of operating cost to delays in the working timetable, which have to be tackled. And not only so, plus, as the previous speaker says, we had to liaise with the different authorities to be sure that these new laws, actually how you are going to apply them. So this took a lot of times and a lot of also synergies with our clients to find the best solutions to implement the safety requirements imposed by the law on these situations. On the other side, we have seen increase on litigations. There has been companies that, depending on whether they have been sue or request, or whether they want to have a claim, an analysis of really a pre-analysis of the chances on this situation. Another important issues was relating on contract management, how we're going to really treat the COVID scenario. It's going to be a force majeure, it's going to be a change in law. So all of these issues depend, each contract has its own history, and will be subject also from the status of the project. And this is something to take account, and we work very closely with the project manager on each project. That was most of what we have seen so far due to the COVID-19 situation.
Thank you. To sum up, it was an increase and a decrease at the same time of some practice area and an assistance related to the contingency in general. We'll see what happens in the next few months, because some trends might reverse again. But let's talk about what we can call the new normal, since at the moment in most jurisdictions, governments are setting up new phases. Countries are gradually reopening up again after the restrictions and the lockdowns of the very first weeks. Riham, how are you handling this new phase now?
So thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to contribute today. As you just said, it's the new norm. So the new norm, the world will never be like before COVID-19. Things changed, and I see in the change a great opportunity, and with the challenges arise new opportunities as well. So the reopening, of course, is coming in most of the Middle East and Africa countries. I believe in Africa is a bit less impacted by the COVID-19 than the Middle East countries. The reopening gradually started in many regions and in many industries. Depending on the industry, of course, some of the industries already booming during the COVID-19, the telecommunication, the online shopping, and so on. And some others are suffering. My very sincere advice, and this is what I also discuss with my other colleagues in the country and in the region, is first of all, we need to be prepared. The regulations evolved heavily during the past couple of months, despite the closure of many countries, curfews, and so on. Specifically, when it comes to the health regulations, it was booming and evolving very fast. Some of the countries, like Algeria, Saudi, and Egypt, they seized this opportunity actually to issue and develop some regulations they were willing to have, and maybe they didn't have the chance to have. So if we take Saudi, for example, Saudization became much more effective and became much more needed in the country. And it goes without saying that the applicability and implementation is very fast. So I believe that the colleagues handling a country like Saudi, they should keep an eye open on the regulation, the implementation, and a very close contact within these authorities to know how the new regulation will be applied. In Egypt, as said by our colleague Radwa, the data privacy, for example, there was many discussions during the couple of past years around the data privacy law that it will be issued, and finally it has been issued only 1 week. To a very great extent, closer to the GDPR, however, consent-based regulation a little bit. And the implementation is yet a question mark. We're really looking forward, and we're looking forward to some of the webinars and guidance from the external councils on the implementation. For Algeria, I guess there is also new regulations regardless of the industry in regard to the shares and the ownership of the companies, and it's becoming more clear and more visible to the companies, and encouraging the foreign investment. So if we keep an eye on the evolvement of regulations, there is also the close part to my heart. The soft side is the skills that we need to have in such a challenging situation. In-house counsels need to have the agility to cope with the changes, to understand the need of their business, and to provide the legal opinion and the legal advices based on the request and not only based on what the law is saying. For me, the health and safety issue is a given. I believe within all multinational or local companies, this will be ticked easily because everyone is afraid. If the corporate is not even taking care of this, I believe that the people will be taking care of their own safety. So agility and the perspective. Would we take this challenge as opportunity for the new norm? The new norm to go digital, the new norm to challenge the status quo, the new norm to help the business in achieving their targets, or the behavior that we don't wish to have is the uncertainty, we're afraid of the change, and so on. Sure. I don't want to take long from the time of the other colleague, but I hope I answered your question.
Yes, obviously. It seems to me that dialogue is the key in the relationship with authorities and law firms, and also in general the openness of the General Counsel to the new needs of the companies. Mahmoud, what is your involvement in the company today in this situation, in this new phase we are discussing?
Yeah. Good evening, everyone, and thanks for this participation. Actually, let me start talking about the reopening, and I'm completing over my colleague Riham concerning our sales and our projects. Let's start with our sales. Actually, in phase one of the pandemic, when it started in January, some countries have total lockdown, like Morocco and Nigeria have 24 hours lockdown. So it was very hard to have any new opportunities in these countries. The second phase, starting March or starting April, in some countries it become some lighter measures, and then we have some opportunities to restart business there. The good thing that we have, some of our employees were located in the countries, and they had some good relations inside with partners and with the government. So we had a speed recovery from the pandemic impact. We had a team in Morocco, in Ghana, in DRC, in Madagascar, in Senegal, in Cote d'Ivoire, in Nigeria. So somehow Africa was our backbone in getting recovery from this pandemic, using our employees based there. Also for contracts that have been for long terms, it haven't been stopped totally, and we are completing our sales for all this. Concerning the sales in Europe, actually the best country in Europe was Germany, definitely. They have a perfect situation there, and we have never stopped concerning our export to Germany. For other countries, it have been slowly recovering. It have stopped for a while, but it had now been recovering very. Concerning the projects and the manufacturing, in Ethiopia, for example, they still have some quarantine for 14 days if you come to Ethiopia, so it's not very easy to send our people there. We have some projects. We are looking for some opportunities concerning having new factories and new projects in Ethiopia related to electricity and related to power generation. In Kenya, they still have some severe measures in Kenya. We are looking for some opportunities now, and we are in serious stage about having some factories in Kenya. Uganda is the most severe actually measures they have taken. It's still under almost total lockdown. So we have somehow exclude Uganda from our agenda. In Tanzania, we have a huge project. It's a huge dam. It's Rufiji Dam. Tanzania is one of the countries that have almost denied the COVID-19. They said that there is nothing like that. They don't have any measures. So it's in Tanzania, it's almost completing normally. In Nigeria, we have almost 4 factories that we are going to build very soon, and we are focusing on Nigeria. We have very good relation with the government, and very soon we will have very good existence in Nigeria. That's a brief about our situation, how we are reopening now, and nothing more than I'm currently in Dubai, so it's easy now to get access everywhere. You have some measures to have some tests, but it's easy to get traveling from country to country now. It's getting better, inshallah.
Yes. Let's focus on budget now, because one of the challenges, Mohamed, that you and every general counsel must be preparing for is the review of the budget. Will you review it to cut it further? How will you do it?
Well, thanks, Larry, for this question. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, LC Publishing, fellow speakers, and everyone attending. Thank you very much for that. And always giving me the opportunity to speak and give you my thoughts about what's happening. Definitely, the answer is yes, as far as I'm concerned. The budget is a very sensitive and important, crucial topic that come as number one consequence of this pandemic. Okay, but what actually we are doing? We have the company full budget from one side, and then the legal department budget from the other side. Both are attached somehow to each other. So the first thing I recall, first day of management meeting after the pandemic itself, management decided number of measures, and one of them is decrease the external lawyers' fees. Not fees, sorry, decrease the use of external lawyers, unless for necessary reasons, of course. We cannot, of course, do this. We count a lot on our colleagues from external law firms for several matters, on top of them litigation and others. So, but we've been instructed to keep it to the minimum. Okay. We had at Siemens $1 billion US travel expenses a year, and I'm telling you, for this first quarter, it's coming nearly zero. So I think this adds on to the company P&L somehow, right? So we're cutting the travels in the legal department as well. Zero travels, zero hoteling, zero entertainment, no business meetings, no lunch, dinner, whatever. We also have a higher freeze unless recruitments that we have already committed to. Like we've offered some people, we have sent some offers to certain people, so we're not retrieving with these. We continue as is with this recruitment. However, a full hiring freeze is on, globally already deployed, right? So if there is a freeze hiring, it comes also with, unfortunately, promotions. I wouldn't say freeze, but put on hold. All promotions, all salary increases, all other incentives, just put on hold for a while. So if you're talking about all of this, this definitely reflecting on my budget as a general counsel for a legal department. Headcount, luckily at Siemens, we haven't touched our headcount, our people yet. And hopefully we will not do this. But if things go more with second wave or whatever people are talking about, maybe we could consider this as well. I don't want to share numbers here. This is not the forum for it, but I'm telling you, this pandemic is definitely affecting our budget, no doubt. However, we're trying to mitigate as much as we can to play within this budget to be perceived as, yes, we are saving costs and we're cutting some expenses. However, we still do have expenses that we cannot tolerate. So this is more or less the effect of the pandemic on the budget, on the legal department itself.
Many general counsels will face renewed pressure from the company to cut expenses. You're not alone, I'm sure about this. Mr. Bicciato, a comment on the review of the budget from clients. Will it be sustainable for law firms? Are there alternatives to cut costs?
I think there are alternatives. Mm-hmm. The equation less budget equal cutting cost, I think is too simplistic, and it may end up to have an impact also on the quality of the legal services. So I also prefer speaking about less budget, equal needs to agree on a more wise and efficient, tailor-made fee structure with the General Counsel. To achieve this, we need to partner more and more with them to sustain them in highlighting what are the priorities, try to understand with them what are the priorities, and coming up with also thinking out of the box with fee structure that can be reasonable and take into account this situation. So we have a number of tools that have been always there, which can be blender rate, which can be some success fees, and the combination after discussing really case by case with the General Counsel is a way to find a solution which is acceptable for both, which is cost efficient. So in our experience, this is true always, but of course this situation will force you really to even be more closer than before and trying to find the best fee structure with the clients. As the previous speaker says, is a way of managing the fees within the budget, and you can still work in an efficient way, and this will depend also on how you organize your work internally. But personally, I don't think there is going to be a massive reduction of the budget across all sectors. There are some sectors like healthcare, food and beverage, which probably will not suffer these cuts in the budget, while other, yes. So it depends on a case by cases.
Yes, some sectors in which the budget will raise indeed, such as the sectors you were just mentioning now. And secondly, the need for assistance will continue to be strong, and I'm sure we'll see it even in the following months. Radwa, COVID-19 is having and has had from the very first days, as you said before, a huge impact on contracts. How are you dealing with contract management and enforcement?
Yes, sure. As Riccardo had just mentioned, that contract management was one of the huge issues that we had to deal with. And actually, the first problem with contracts was to prepare a plan to review all the existing contracts at the time the COVID-19 has arisen, and to figure out how can we maintain these contracts. Some of the terms and conditions in these contracts we couldn't meet because of the pandemic. So we had to have a plan to review all contracts to avoid any potential liability. And the other problem, as you just mentioned, with contracts was related to enforceability. So because courts ceased working for a while, and because of the sudden and emergency, we had to find an alternative to courts. So we had to sit down with our counterparties in most of the cases to negotiate and try to settle some issues in order to reach a win-win situation from a business perspective, and to avoid any risk, legal risk or liability. One more problem related to contracts was having some special clauses in specific contracts, such as the material adverse change clause in the financial agreements. I didn't have this myself, but from the experiences of some other colleagues in, in-house teams, the only possibility was to assess the risk of credit and funding lines to business to figure out how to deal with these special types of clauses. Another important issue related to contracts management is the force majeure concept. Actually, people usually, when we talk about COVID-19, lawyers usually think about force majeure immediately. So we had to be very careful about this. And we had to be very honest with the client, or I mean, with our company, that force majeure is not a get out of the contract free card. It is an exception to the general rule. And courts are usually sensitive about it, and they apply it in a very narrow way. So we had to be very honest and transparent and explain it. And in a jurisdiction like Egypt, for example, we had to figure out the differences between force majeure and other similar legal concepts, such as the unforeseeable circumstances or the emergency circumstances, as people call it sometimes. So we have to be careful about the main differences between these two concepts, and in terms of conditions of applying each concept, the consequences and the other legal implications. So for example, in case of force majeure, there is an impossibility to perform an obligation, but in case of unforeseeable circumstances, performing the obligation just becomes oppressive. And even the consequences of both concepts are different. In force majeure, you end the obligation unless otherwise agreed by the contracting parties. In unforeseeable circumstances, you just reduce the obligations to restore the balance in rights and obligations. So we had to ask ourselves first, what is the applicable law? What is the contract language? Are we going to raise this concept through court or away from courts? Because if we raise it through court, we have to be ready for the criteria that the courts are going to apply, such as the forcibility test, the causation, and some other requirements like the notice requirement. And we had also to ask ourselves an important question. Can COVID-19, is it only COVID-19 that we can consider it an event for force majeure, or could it be one of the consequences of COVID-19 if COVID-19 is not applicable to our case, such as the government actions taken following COVID-19? Travel bans, domestic emergencies, or lockdown of some facilities. So we had to consider all these legal issues, communicate with our client in a transparent way, explain the entire situation, and then we make a decision in favor of the business, and at the same time that doesn't conflict with any existing laws or regulations.
So case by case, basically. It is important in any case to maintain business relationships and negotiate, but not always it is possible, and litigation is expected to rise. What about contracts where government are involved and activity, which is an activity that falls directly within what you're doing now with Sofreco, Radwa?
Well, actually, government contracts in particular are of very specific nature. So we had to be very careful with them. We had the same challenges that are related to other contracts, like civil and commercial contracts. But because of the special nature of the government contract, and by special nature, I mean having the government as one of the contracting parties, but not acting or standing in the same place like the private party, but acting as an administration or administrative body having the upper hand in the contract to amend the contract, to change the financial structuring of the contract. And that's why we say government contracts are of very special nature. And the other reason we say this is usually government contracts such as the PPP, public-private partnership agreements, are related to a sustainable development project. And finance usually comes from an external body, like an international organization, which puts pressure on both the government and the private contracting company. So we had to be very careful with government interference and the sudden changes in policy in particular, and the financial structure, the delivery times, the deadlines, and so on. We also had another problem related to this type of agreements, which is technology. It was very challenging because when you're dealing with the government, particularly in developing countries, you are always facing a problem with using technology. So we could do nothing about this, but this was one of the problems that we were facing. And the question that doesn't have an answer, which is the unknown, how long will this international emergency last? and what are the measures that will be taken by the government as a party to the contract to mitigate the risks arising. So what we really did was to try to review some of our PPP contracts to identify the financial risks. And we had to be very flexible with the government since they have the upper hand in these types of contracts. We had also to secure some additional resources. For example, being aware with the practices and other legal systems in the same field to protect our company and the project at the same time. We had to have like crisis emergency teams sometime in place with specialized experts to secure a kind of responsiveness to the management questions and to the government questions as well. The last thing is we had to be very careful about the application of issues such as force majeure, because when it comes to administrative law, it's not always force majeure or unforeseeable circumstances concepts that would apply. There are some other concepts, like what we call in Egypt, the act of strength theory that was established by the Egyptian State Council, and the material adverse event theory as well. So we have to be very careful, study the case very well, and decide which theory we can raise to discuss any problem or issue or emergency arising in relation to contracts.
Once again, the General Counsel can make a difference on these. Let's focus on risk management, because before you were talking about risk management, Mahmoud, in times of changes, it is very important to ensure that the risk tolerance level is consistent across the whole organization. Do you agree? Do you agree? And if yes, how are you doing it?
Yes, definitely, Ilaria. Actually, what we started from the beginning of the pandemic is that we have a committee that we have collected from our colleagues in Sweden. It was completed from finance, legal, compliance, and audit in order to study our case and our situation concerning the business and ensuring the continuity of the business worldwide. As most of our colleagues know, Sweden has more than 120 companies worldwide, and we are 15,000 employees. So we had a huge task to review and to know how exactly we will handle this matter to guarantee a smooth exit from the situation with the less loss. Again, and we sent a letter to our clients announcing that we may have a force majeure event here, just to save our legal rights in case it have impacted in a huge way on our obligations. We have reviewed all contracts that we have made with our clients and with our partners to ensure that we do have a proper force majeure clause that includes pandemics, and to know exactly what will be the risks if anything happened, if any of our obligations we couldn't fulfill in time, what exactly is our boundaries, and that's it. We also reviewed our insurance policies and ensure that it covers the pandemic, and if it didn't, we have paid more for the insurance companies to try at least to avoid in the future any consequences from the pandemic. We got actually a periodic reports from our management worldwide in Africa, in Asia, in Europe, concerning the situations there and what's exactly the measures they took concerning the contracts, concerning the fulfillment of our obligation with our partners and clients. And we had put a full strategy for our group to follow to ensure to mitigate all risks that we can face. And again, as I said, our local staff was very helpful in finalizing or ending any problem that may arise or any consequence from the pandemic. Thanks, God.
I see. Riham, COVID is also raising compliance issues, as Mahmoud was saying just now. Depending upon the company, different regulatory compliance risk may be lower during normal times, may increase right now during the pandemic.
So actually, I'm a bit maybe lucky among the other colleagues that I'm working in the most strict and heavily regulated industry, the healthcare. And with this, I guess during the past couple of years, the role of the General Counsel progressed and evolved from a narrow risk mitigation to someone really very important to provide strategic advice, not only to the board, to the CEOs, but also to the other colleagues within the organization. Some organizations are splitting the compliance function from the legal one. Some others are still combining. In both cases, I guess both functions should talk the same way, exactly the same way. And the knowledge level, again, should be the same. Why I'm saying this, while the compliance are expert and will be helping in the training, in the governance model, in the setting up policies and SOPs, still the accountability for the legal colleagues is with very high importance when it comes to extraterritorial laws, for example, UK Bribery Act, Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, the FCPA law, the antitrust regulations as well. So these are some compliance framework, despite that the company might have its own policies in this regard, but it's the role of the General Counsel and the legal team to maintain appropriate control and compliance with these regulations. Why I'm saying so? I'm referring to what both Sha'rawi and Radwa said. So Radwa was mentioning how things are maybe rolling out with the jurisdictions in Egypt and so on. And Sha'rawi was speaking about the risk mitigation. So during a COVID-19 time, whether this is considered as force majeure or not, but the pandemic situation did create a perplex and changes and paradox and so on. Definitely, regardless of the territory, the antitrust regulation will be really active in seeking proactive controls and measurements with the companies, regardless of the industry. So this is one of the most important roles of the legal colleagues. The General Counsel role is to ensure that the compliance framework is well established. The colleagues in the board and the associates are aware of such risk. Some other regulation, I see it very relevant to the compliance as well. And again, it depends from company to another whether this is handled by the legal function or the compliance. Again, back to the data privacy. The way this going digital, I believe that so many companies are using data analytics, artificial intelligence, and going into a new ways in handling business. So we were speaking in the beginning of our session to the new norm. So the new norm, I guess, is increasing. So there is no more possibility for the face-to-face meeting in most of the countries yet, or even if this is possible, still the virtual one is the most preferable. It goes without saying as well when it comes to the commercial transactions. So back to the point when we said that the companies booming are Amazon, for example, Apple company, and so on. So the more we use the digital solutions, it's very practical and in some areas very safe to use. However, the exposure of the data, the transfer, the control, the process of such data are of big exposure to the companies as well. So what we did, I guess it's similar to what Mahmoud was saying. We're having a governance board. And the governance board where finance, legal and compliance and the relevant business colleagues are attending. And again, the dialogue. So I speak with our compliance or head of compliance and ethics at least twice a week. We need to echo what we're seeing and ensure that the risk is well foreseen, controlled, or if there is a gap, we work on it together.
Yes, the pandemic showed to the entire business community that once again that technology is very, very, very important. Riham, are you investing or planning to invest in legal tech following the virus?
Sorry, I got a bit disconnected. Can you please repeat again?
Yes, I was saying that the technology, the pandemic showed the importance of technology once again. So I was wondering if you plan to invest more in technologies following this pandemic.
Yes, definitely. It goes without saying. On the business level, we're exploring so many digital and technology solutions that we never thought about before. And we were feeling a bit confident that the old way is the most secured and the way that will benefit the business. So the business is investing and the legal team as well. So for us, for example, if we take an on-ground example on what we did with Novartis legal team, we have a very small tools, digital solutions when it comes to contract management, when it comes to litigation and so on. So we did touch base with some colleagues working in Google and in Microsoft, so known with their advanced systems and so on. And we started to explore with them what they are using and how the cost will be if we borrow only one, a very simplified version from what they are using. The other thing that we're exploring as well is how to expedite the move in the country going digital. So Egypt is encouraging and almost on daily basis, most of the authorities are issuing either news or new regulations towards the digital move and the new technologies and so on. So we're keeping a dialogue with these authorities in order that this, once it happens, we will benefit from it immediately, or at least we exchange the expertise together.
Technologies, I think that can also be useful to law firms in terms of new services that they might offer in case they decide to implement new tools and systems. But apart from technologies in general, the changes that you are witnessing, and in some cases, as you said during this discussion we had today, planning, these changes are somehow an effect of the lessons that you learned from this crisis, from this pandemic. Mohamed, what have you learned from coronavirus?
Yeah, thanks again, Ilaria. I think we have all learned something, right? To answer this question, actually, in a more structured way, I would say that the lessons learned from this situation are implicated on both entities, for companies on one basket and on employees from the other basket. So on companies, for example, we will find that business, we as lawyers, we had to review the existing contracts that business are in, works are under running and under execution. We have to review these contracts to see how are we affected by this situation, whether there is direct effect, there is damage or not. And my colleague Radwa and Mahmoud as well already both have tackled on the contracts issue in more than one aspect, truly in a comprehensive way. So this is number one lesson learned. Not only reviewing your contracts, but to make sure for future contracts that you have the proper clause in place that will cover such situation and other situations as well. Because now everything is open. We have opened the Pandora box. We don't know what else is coming on the way. This one aspect, the business side. There is also the office tech and communication. I'm an old schooler. I always believe in the face-to-face discussions, face-to-face negotiations and meetings. This is my approach, and I think this is the approach of other millions around the globe, right? But now we have to change this culture. Our CEOs who are still the same generation or even older generation, they all the same conception, which is, can we do it without even having face-to-face meetings or not? And it turns out to be that yes, we can do it. So companies now are thinking more of how they can ease their existence. And Siemens is always stepping ahead. We have this Comfy application. It's an application where you say, where you get, it's actually, this is for working from home. And if you're attending office, so you just log to it, book your desk in case you're coming to the office. You'll know who else is booking a desk and you'll know who's not there. And then you can measure the criteria of whether to go to office or not, to avoid the, or to maintain the social distancing, right? Also the chat programs, the meeting programs, Teams, Zoom, as we are doing now. I never imagined that we'll have a webinar someday organized by LC Publishing without being there, without being in Cairo or in Madrid or in Milan, right? Having this is a privilege as well. And I said this as well before, now we have the advantage of attending more than one webinar a day. Previously, we used to attend like 2, 3, 4 a year, if we are so lucky. Now we can attend more. We can get to more network. This, again, this is the Panadora box. The last impact on companies or lesson learned for companies is, companies now, you should really consider the office space. And I know for a fact that there are some companies who are really considering the office space for the coming 10 years. What's needed, what's not needed, how many floors, how many even offices, desks, or whatever. We know for a fact that some companies like Google, YouTube, and other companies, you are already set to all employees 100% working from home for the coming till the end of this year and maybe to 2021, right? And this will be a trend that will never stop from company to another. But these are more or less, among others, the effect or the lesson learned from this pandemic on companies. On employees, we need to get rid of being old schoolers. We need to get rid of these old notions of meeting each other and speaking to each other. This is not happening anymore. As I said previously, we need to take off the suit, but not as a physical suit, but in a way that we need to find new ways to present ourselves and our ideas to others. And ironically, amongst the team, I was speaking to the team, they said, one of the comments was, we are getting close to each other. With this distance meetings and with these conferences, we're getting close to each other. We speak to each other more. And this is another privilege, right? But for employees, this is an impact. But we need to learn. We need to learn how to be close to the business. Because if we're not showing that we are there, what value are we bringing to the table, right? We have to show that we are close to our teams as well, to our managers, to our team members, and even colleagues and peers. We have to be there. We have to speak to each other and collaborate all the time without showing that you're there and showing the value that you are bringing to the table. This might be a huge impact on you. So the lesson learned here is be there. Show that you are here and you're bringing value to this company. Okay? But again, if these are to how I view the main learned lessons from the pandemic, there are hundreds of other stuff that we're learning time by time.
And focusing on general counsel, do you have any specific tip to help general counsel to emerge stronger from this crisis?
Yeah, as I've always said to my friends, colleagues, team members, I've said before, even in a previous conference, guys, this is a good time to study. Lawyering, advocacy, our job is attached 100% to reading, to studying, to improving, enhancing your qualifications all the time. Of course, Radwa, you know this, you're teaching people, you're touching upon generations, and you know exactly what I'm saying. But this is the perfect time for us all to study more, to learn more, to enhance and improve our qualification. This is number one. Number two, focusing on new areas of law. Riham just said now that we are getting into new laws that never been there. And even governments are taking this opportunity, they're taking the leverage of this situation to issue new and draft new laws. E-signature law. We have now the data privacy law in Egypt. And a lot of laws relates to what digital laws that we've never touched upon before, just on the face of it, but never into deep. Now we have to get younger lawyers, ourselves, everybody. We need to get in touch with these, because this will reflect on our company's relationships, contractual relationships and relationships in the business as well. But this is another area that we all need to take care of. Last but not least, although this is tough time, although the communication is not the best as we aspire, but this is a good time to expand our networks. I don't know how, but do whatever it takes to expand your network. Find way to expand your network, get to know more new people, present yourself, shine. This is the time to network. That's it from my side for the tips now, but of course I'm open to questions and open to discussions with other panelists and attendees.
Yes, yeah. It's a good idea, in my opinion, to see and to know also to hear from the other general counsel what they think about these. Tips from you, a couple of tips from you to Mahmoud.
Thank you, Ilaria. Actually, I will complete on my colleague Mohamed what I was saying. First thing, we should stay centered. We should be calm. We are all facing an extraordinary situation, and we are all facing new questions that we have never been raised before from our colleagues, from our teams, from our partners, from our management. We should thoroughly study how to answer these questions, because it's all new. A lot of theories, as Radwa said, will be on table. Which one will apply, which one will not, how we can mitigate our risks. It's very important to stay calm. Always the lawyer is a source of calmness when we are talking about crisis. So we are now in a crisis, and we should be the most wise people on table. That's my first tip. Second thing, digitalization is extremely important. We are all now talking about digitalization on everything, on documents, on contracts, on e-signature, on e-learning, on everything. So we should get prepared, we and the generations that will follow. But we should start from us, from our teams, and from our surroundings to teach them how digitalization is extremely important, how they should learn to use WebEx, Zoom, Microsoft Teams, how it's normal to have a virtual board of directors meetings. We can have general assembly meetings, we can have whatever kind of business negotiations over meetings and virtually. It's very important to get learning that management could do and have all decisions virtually. It's very important to learn that. Concerning litigation arbitration, also I have a thought about that I think in the very near future, from 5 to 7 years maximum, I believe that we will have an e-arbitration and e-litigation. No more papers, no more documents, no more physical hearings, especially for commercial and contracts. I think 100% of it will be virtual. So it's very important to get ready from now, because e-litigation is coming, and is coming in a very precise way. And I believe, as I said, maximum from 5 to 7 years, most of the cases will be virtual. We should get and we should stay alerted and updated. This is one of the important tips I'm giving to my colleagues. We should subscribe to all the websites and the legal analysis and all the legal opinions issued from our colleagues worldwide, to get updated and to know what exactly our colleagues in our places, in our companies, in other companies, other countries have made. So when we face the same situation, at least we have a certain background how to react. This is very important also. And definitely we should follow lessons learned. Lessons learned is very important to get also from our colleagues, from our teams, to know what we can predict, how we can mitigate the risks that we are facing now, and we will face in the future.
Thank you very much. Riham, the same question to you, a couple of tips for general counsel and corporate counsel in general, because we also have plenty of in-house lawyers working with you.
So I wouldn't repeat what Mahmoud and Mohamed just said about the need to network, to learn, and so on. I would add that in order to find innovative solutions, we need to have a diverse people. So I highly encourage the general counselor working in this industry. It's the right time maybe to do some change as well. Whenever you're finding a candidate different, completely different than your character, and capable, of course, please ensure that this talent is getting the right opportunity in the organization. The E era, I believe, in litigation, in contracts, in signature, in everything, will mandate agility, so stay agile, and ensure that the active listening is there. It's not only about that we listen and that's it. We need to understand very well the request and the need of the business, especially in some industries where the numbers are not really going well. There will be a very high stress on the associates still with the organization to achieve business results with different tools. So I highly encourage all the team to ensure that the active listening is there. Last but not least, a diverse team, especially when it's not only about the gender, and it's about the background, and especially the millennials, the newly graduate colleagues are a bit familiar with the technology rather than me, at least, rather than the people graduated only last year. I'm kidding, not with 20 years experience. They understand a little bit the need differently, and they are quite familiar with so many social media tools, e-tools, and so on. Their ideas sometimes seems to be crazy, however, very efficient. And the very good thing about it, that it's new, different, maybe it just need to go into a practical channel to go to the light. That's it from my side. Thank you, Ilaria.
Thank you very much. Radwa, do you want to add any tip?
Yes, I mean, there is not that much to add besides what my colleagues have just explained, but maybe I can just confirm some concepts like the very careful drafting of contracts, because we have been all facing this problem. I don't think there is any general counsel or any in-house legal team anywhere who didn't face this problem with contracts drafting. And maybe the other issue is to be ready for crisis management. Always have a backup plan, some measures in hand so that you can face any crisis properly. Of course, to become more friendly with technology, and supporting alternative working strategies, as we all make it a habit for the company to the extent we can. Another important issues, like what Riham have just said, is thinking business-wise. It's not only about that's the law and what it says, but you have to put yourself in the shoes of the decision makers of your company and the management of the company, and you need to think with them business-wise, trying to find solutions to the extent you can. Of course, be very responsive and always careful about your regulator, what's happening, what's going on, any new policies. And maybe something else that I have been facing in the field of consultancy and development projects in particular, is to be creative and think with the company, like linking the company to the community, to create or to support the company to have a role in solving or facing the global crisis arising, like enhancing the concept of corporate social responsibility and explaining what it means from a legal perspective, how can you contribute and be helpful. So these are more or less the lessons learned and tips that we may share with our colleagues everywhere.
Thank you very much. Before going to Mr. Bicciato, let me remind that we will be starting soon the Q&A section. So if someone in the audience has a particular question, please write it clicking on the Q&A icon, and I will pick some questions for our speakers. Mr. Bicciato, the legal market will become more competitive as a result of this pandemic. How can law firms emerge in this new scenario? What will they need?
Absolutely. We expect that law firms that can offer premium, high-quality service will surely be able to react better to these uncertain times, and for sure better than those firms who can just provide services that are considered a commodity. So I perfectly agree with all our speakers that you have to be also creative. To be creative, you have to think differently. So you cannot afford anymore to provide the same service that they can do on their own. So why going to a law firms if it's something plain vanilla, if you don't have something, a value to add on their brainstorming? So it's going to be fundamental really to enhance the quality of our legal advice, to be a step forward all the times, which means trying to understand where also our legislator is going in the future, which is the likely scenario which will happen. This is going to be fundamental to be competitive. Another things in which COVID, I will say, is not just a lesson, but has been a confirmation that investing in technology will make the difference for law firms, as will allow them to be more close to the clients. I like what it was said here, that we are, even though we are very far, we're even more closer now that we are using these technological tools to stay near the client, and this is perfectly correct. So in these uncertain scenarios, being able to really leverage on technological tools that allowed us to not only to provide a better legal service, a more reactive legal service in terms of response, but also to organize events where we can brainstorm with our clients, we can really to understand their needs. These make the difference. So the technology investments for the firms is more and more fundamental. And I'm pretty sure that those firms who did not understand this will be left behind us in this scenario, but also when we will be back to normality.
Thank you very much. We have a question that it isn't specifically directed to anyone, so you can volunteer to respond. Just raise your hand and we will turn on your microphone. The question is on contract management. I'm going to read it. Concerning contract management and the adaptation of clauses, how were the dispute resolution clauses modified to suit the COVID-19 situation? Thank you very much. Who wants to answer to this question? Riham.
Can you hear me?
Yes, yeah. Now yes.
So we had a couple of big deals actually that supposed to be executed during H1 this year. And of course, things did not go well, both sides, from our side and the third party side. I believe that we had e-negotiations. So this happened a lot. We used Zoom a lot in understanding what happened, the impact, the financial impact, the consequences, and so on. It happened only one time where the e-negotiation did fail, and there was certain timelines for arbitration. Of course, according to the applicable law for this deal, we were a bit lucky that authorities were expanding some deadlines a contrario. So it was very explicit and so on. So I believe that negotiation is a key. In case of failure for negotiation, it goes without saying that the timelines need to be reviewed. If for any reason the timelines as well was not well perceived by the second party in the agreement and so on, I believe that one of the parties should immediately initiate an amendment or a need for official negotiation to amend some process of the country.
Thank you very much. We have another question. I work for a litigation practice in South Florida. US civil procedure provides for live deposition of parties or non-parties. I'm finding very frustrating taking these depots online via Zoom or Skype. It is not the same as a live deposition. All the nuance and reactions are lost. I do not know if any other colleague working in different jurisdiction is facing the same challenge and if they want to share their experience. Who wants to give a comment?
If I can
Sure.
just, I'm a fan. If we can really switch to online filing. We had two cases. One was is an arbitration. So, here in Cairo Arbitration Center, it was working very well. I mean, it closed for a while, but if we were going to be stuck with Egyptian court, we could be even worse the problem. And the possibility also to file online, in this scenario, we were able to move forward without waiting and uncertainty when we're going to file. Sometimes filing arbitration doesn't mean that you're going to go to the end. It's just to put pressure in the negotiation. So, so timely filing is very important. So I know there may be some problems in the online filing, but still it's something that you can do. I think it's much worse to not have any possibility to really file a claim and help your client.
Thank you very much. Maybe Mohamed wanted to add anything, because I said he was saying yes.
Yeah, actually, I need to add. Yeah, the question is very tricky. It's always a pleasure for the lawyer to negotiate face to face and to conquer the other party, or at least to have another drafting that we are doing together in a meeting room. Even in the negotiation practice, and when you learn how you should use your stress and use your energy to conquer the other side or to try to convince him of something, it's very important to use it face to face. You couldn't do the same over virtual. It's a tricky question. Yeah, I know we are talking about virtual life and how we should adapt it, but if we are talking about a spirit of lawyer, no, definitely a meeting room and the face-to-face negotiation is a victory, definitely. So yes, I do feel the same, but it's a new era that you should adapt for. Maybe my colleague Mohamed wants to add something also.
Yeah, thank you, Mahmoud. This is a good point. I wouldn't add more than Riccardo and Mahmoud has just said, but I would say that in some jurisdictions, some judicial systems are already using the online platforms even before this pandemic. One of them is obviously UAE Emirates, right, where I live at the moment. And what I'm saying is, yes, it's been there, it's been used, but not as he was still. The lawyer's attendance before the court is crucial thing. Again and again, this whole generation is the generation of attending before the court, submitting documentation, saying your argument loudly and pleading. This is what we are learned to do. We don't know anything else. But now, submitting documents or attending experts or whatever, this is fine. This can be done via online or whatever. But to really bleed and argue online, this is going to be the challenge. Our experience is not complete yet. The question is, can you share your experiences? Not complete yet. We're still in the phase of submitting via online and submitting documentation and corresponding with parties and the judge and other involved parties. But to really comprehensively give a concrete example of something that happened or something to share, I don't think this is the time for it yet. But definitely this will come within the coming few months. And that will be saved for another conference and webinar soon. Okay, Laria?
Yes, thank you.
Please,
thank you.
Please ask Aldo to set another one for such topic and others.
Obviously we will. Mr. Bicciato, do you want to add anything as a closing remark for this conversation? Because we ended all the questions. So if you want to add anything, then I will close this conversation.
I actually, I subscribe. Everything has been said so far, and I saw then on the Q&A. I was referring just on the fine, not, and I perfectly agree that it's completely different if you have to argue with a counterpart. We are not used to these tools yet. So also what will be the way we convey our thoughts is a learning process, and is something that will change. But for sure, I think it will be important, at least for advisor, is really take this situation as an opportunity really to also be closer to General Counsel. I think we need synergy on both sides. Again, it's not a question of budget. It's a question to provide the legal service that the General Counsel needs. And we need to support. They are excellent lawyers. So what we have to do is to help them, to brainstorm with them and think out of the box, find solutions that were not on the table, and that can help the management to take and to evaluate other opportunities, other fields that before were just out of the picture. That will be my last thoughts to share with you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bicciato, and also thank to our speakers and to the audience for attending this webinar. It has been for me a real pleasure to moderate this interesting discussion. And let me just remind you to read our portals to keep posted on legal market news, and stay tuned on our new initiatives. Thank you very much, and see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you,
everybody.
Thank you, guys.
Bye.
Stay safe.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.